Is it likely that you'll be doing any more comedy routine stuff?
Well, we have one thing that you might qualify as a comedy routine that's built into the show right now. It's a new piece that hasn't been released yet. It's a combination of two songs. One of them is called Don't Eat the Yellow Snow. It's about an Eskimo and his seal and an evil fur trapper. And then the evil fur trapper has something terrible happen to him, and then he has to get repaired, and in order to get repaired he seeks out he has to trudge across the tundra so that he can get to St. Alfonso's Parish at the juncture of the Columbia River Delta, and he has to seek out the representative of St. Alfonso, who is the patron saint of the smelt fishermen of Portuguese extraction, and he has to find St. Alfonso's only authorized representative here on earth, Father Vivian Oblivion, man of the cloth. Dun dun dun. And then the two songs are Don't Eat the Yellow Snow and St. Alfonso's Pancake Breakfast.
The music that you play, is it heavily scored, or is it largely built around pre-arranged patterns?
50% of the things that we play are completely scored out, up to and including all the beats that the drums are supposed to play. And inside of those scored pieces, there are spaces left open for instrumental improvisation, much as you would in a normal jazz context. And the rest of the show is pieces that are either so simple that you wouldn't bother to write them down, and you just hum them to the other musicians and they would pick it up, or else they're completely improvised. We try during each show to improvise one piece 100%.
To get musicians to play this sort of material, do you find it difficult at all?
It's one of the hardest things I ever had to do.
Why? Because they're not used to reading scores?
No. You can always find musicians who can read, and there are plenty of very good reading musicians around, but the people that I like to find have to have these requisites. One, a sense of humor. Two, extreme musical ability in a legitimate sense. They should be able to manipulate their instrument with a great deal of proficiency and be able to read music, because that saves time in learning how to play the stuff. And they also have to be able to feel some sort of blues roots, because most of the stuff that I've written, no matter how weird or complicated it might sound on top, it has some sort of rhythm and blues lurking in the background. And if the musician doesn't have some sort of appreciation of that kind of music, then the performance doesn't come off right.
What sort of blues, you say blues roots, what sort of blues musicians have interested you?
Well, my three favorite guitar players of all time are Johnny Guitar Watson, Guitar Slim, and Clarence Gatemouth Brown. And my favorite blues singers are Little Willie John and Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters and Lightning Slim.
With albums like Live at the Fillmore and Just Another Band from LA, have you ever had any censorship problems with what's on the albums?
Well, the history of the Mothers of Invention has been fraught with censorship problems, and these result when somebody has been employed by somebody else to determine what's best for the public at large, which I think is just a terrible job for anybody to have to live up to. But the first company that we were signed with, MGM Verve, did some bad things to our albums, just randomly chopping things out that they didn't understand. That if they couldn't understand something, they presumed it to be obscene, so they would cut it out. And that spoiled a lot of the work that we did for that label. So then we changed to a special deal with WEA, and we haven't had any censorship problems with them until I got to Australia and went to a press conference yesterday, and during the press conference they were playing some of our albums, and I noticed that the Uncle Meat album had been censored, and they're not supposed to do that. Shouldn't be done. I also heard that the Australian release of the soundtrack for 200 Motels has also been censored. And just to give you an idea of the type of censorship that you're involved in, the only other countries in the world where 200 Motels have been censored are Spain, Portugal, and Brazil. So you people are in trouble. You got to get rid of this censorship stuff. It's not going to do you any good at all.
The stories in those particular two albums, are they real stories?
They're all true.
Even the bit about the gremlin?
That's true. The gremlin is true, yeah.
And the mud shark story?
The mud shark story is true. For those of you who don't know what these stories are, you'll have to get the album and find out what he's talking about. If you do know, they're true. Really was a mud shark. There still are mud sharks. we have actually gone fishing for mud sharks ourselves at that same hotel. Not only that, I have an interview on tape with he was the desk clerk at this place. It's called the Edgewater Inn in Seattle, Washington. And I interviewed this man and asked him technical questions about how many mud sharks they find per week in the beds, and who uses mud sharks and what do they use them for, and his answers were sort of amazing, because I presumed that sexual activities involving a large, rough-surfaced fish is a sort of a thing that only a rock and roll group would get into. But he says, no, that regular straight-life tourists also use mud sharks here at the hotel.
With material for pieces like the Mud Shark and Billy the Mountain and that, they just come out of your day-to-day living and people you meet and that?
Yeah, well, I think that everybody who writes songs must extract what the text of his song from some personal experience. And it just so happens that the way I live my life and the people that I know give me access to types of experiences that are unusual by some standards. So I just write them down and try and share them with other people who may be interested in sharing those unusual experiences, because maybe they don't have time to go to the Edgewater Inn and have fun with a mud shark. So it's like helping the shut-ins,
What first turned you on to the idea of the music that you started with Hot Rats, the Hot Rats album?
Well, up until that time, the main drawback that I could see with most of the Mothers albums prior to the Hot Rats album was the fact that the rhythm section didn't really get off the ground. Jimmy Carl Black was okay as a drummer, and Art Tripp was okay as a drummer, and Billy Monday was okay as a drummer, but none of them were really, hard driving, make you really want to tap your foot. And rather than fire them simply because they weren't hard driving, because we'd all worked together for such a long time, I kept them around, and we're all good friends and we stayed in the band together, but I think the band suffered from lack of having a good beat. So my first venture into an album with a good beat was the Hot Rats thing, and at least 50% of what's on that album is foot-tappable material.
And you're going to extend this idea further and further?
Well, since the time that the first group of Mothers broke up, I've looked around for drummers that had foot-tapping ability. Ainsley Dunbar certainly had it, in an abstract way. And Ralph Humphrey, the drummer that's with us now, certainly has it in an abstract way. You never know, in the future I might get something that's even more basic and primitive. Throbbing, lewd, pulsating rhythms.
Are you going to have listen to any of the Aboriginal music here in Australia?
Depends on what the schedule is like. If today is any indication of what my schedule is going to be like, no, I won't get a chance to hear any of it.
Frank, 200 Motels is unlikely to be released here because of censorship requirements. You've got another film, Uncle Meat, still on film and uncut. Is that likely to be edited?
One day I might finish that, yeah.
Well, have you any more film projects in mind?
I want to make a science fiction movie.
Any idea of a plot line for it?
It has a giant spider in it, and has a woman 8 feet tall, has a con man from the earth who is a religious fanatic. That's a musical.
Right.
The usual stuff, regular.
What about Reuben and the Jets? You've got another Reuben and the Jets band on the road, although you're not closely associated with them personally. What are they doing at the moment?
I believe they're touring with a group called Three Dog Night, and they're about to go to Europe, probably in August.
Are you keeping a very close eye on what they do, or is it something?
Well, I advise them from time to time. I helped them get the group together, and I produced their first album. And occasionally they have little intra-band squabbles, and I sit there and act like a union mediator or something, arbitrator.
What particularly, what made you get the first Reuben and the Jets together yourself?
Well, as I told you before, I always liked rhythm and blues music, and that's just another kind of rhythm and blues music.
Did you? There was some reportage around that you were getting it together in an attempt to make a commercial success out of your music.
Well, if you can imagine, in 1967 releasing, well, it was recorded in 67 and released in 68. If you can imagine releasing an album like that and seriously thinking that that was going to be commercial, you'd see the humor in that statement.
You don't get very much airplay on top 40 stations. You don't get any at all as far in Australia, and I wouldn't imagine you get terribly much overseas. Is commercial success important to you, other than making enough money to do what you want to do?
Well, commercial success represents two things. One, it represents dollars and cents, and two, it represents reaching a large audience. The dollars and cents I'm comfortable with right now because I managed to make enough from the concert tours and so forth, publishing, to pay for the equipment that I use and to pay the people who are making the music. But the problem about reaching a larger audience is it's important to me because more people know my face from a poster or from doing an interview on television or radio or magazine than have ever heard the albums or have ever seen the group live. So it makes you wonder. I'm famous, but most people don't even know what I do.